G'day and welcome to another Blender Guru tutorial. This time we are going to be making towels, because who doesn't want to know how to do that? So many applications. So this is the finished result that you can see right here, obviously. And this is the unflattering image of what it looks like in Blender. So essentially what we're going to be using is the cloth simulator to generate a basic sort of static looking cloth like that. We freeze it at that position, and then we apply a whole bunch of particles and whatnot to create the rest of the towel. So yeah, it's fairly simple once you know how to do it, and it creates a really nice looking result. So let's go ahead now and get started. So with a new scene now open up in Blender, we can delete everything and replace it with a plane. So we're just going to be focusing on the towel for the time being. So towels are rectangular generally. So if we hit S, then hit X, and then just type in the number 2, that's going to scale it along its X axis twice. So it's now twice as long as it is wide, basically. Now, we want to do a bunch of subdividing. Right now, if we were to subdivide right now, you will notice we have a problem. We have rectangular faces. Now that is a really bad thing when it comes to simulations, because it means that you'll get more sort of detail in one direction than you will the other. It will just come out looking awful every single time. So you do not want rectangular faces. You want square faces, square, even faces. So to fix that, all you need to do is hit Control R and just add a loop cut right down the middle there, click, and then just left click, right click, whatever, to put it in its default position. And now, when we subdivide again, you can see we now have square faces, which is perfect. Now, I want to change the number of cuts for this subdivision to 50. Now, this value here will actually affect the outcome of the cloth simulation. The higher you set it to, the more sort of detail you get and the more mass the cloth will take on, I've found. It's sort of bizarre, so just know that if you go higher, you will get different values to mine. But anyway, this will work just fine and dandy for our towel. All right, so we can go now to the physics panel, click cloth, hit Alt-A, and now look, it's working. Our cloth is fading away into the abyss just like it should. So now we could put something underneath it to catch it or whatever, but we want to create the look of a towel that's hanging on a hook. Now we could fashion like a hook, you know, out of a cube or something like that, and then, you know, turn on collision or whatever. But that's overly complicated when there is a much easier solution, which is to use pinning right over there in the settings. You've got something called pinning. So what this will allow us to do is with weight painting, if you hit Control Tab, it'll allow us to paint on the mesh where we want it to be pinned, basically to stay stationary, right? So we want to have it hanging on a hook, right? So somewhere in the middle of the towel, about here, I'm going to do a nice big dot like that. Maybe a couple right there. Okay, that's good. And then once you've done that, you also want to select it from the drop-down menu. You should only have one option there, group. And now, look at that. That little point that we just painted is now staying stationary, and the rest of it's falling down through itself, right? So it's working, but it looks absolutely horrible. So the reason for that is that currently self-collision is turned off. So go ahead and turn that on, and whilst you're at it, increase the distance so that it looks like there's a little bit of fur in between it when it comes to the you know, the towel sort of look. So once we've done this, it should now collide with itself. Sort of. Look at that. It is colliding, but there's part of it that that it's gone through, and not only has it gone through, but it's actually stuck together. So a horrible looking mess, right? So this is a failure of a cloth simulation. So why is that happening? I didn't know until very recently why, but generally this is because it's an inaccurate simulation. And the way to turn up the accuracy is these steps here, this quality of steps. So its default value is 5, but if you find a problem, you need to increase it. So I'm going to increase it to 12, which is a value that I found works fairly well. And once we've done this, the cloth should not go through itself. So let's watch with bated breath. Hopefully I'm right. And yeah, I think I'm right. It's not going through itself. Or if it is, it's very small. No, I don't think it is. That's good. Awesome. I was right. Awesome. All right. So we've got that one value done, so that's good. Check that off. Now let's focus on the rest of this string of miscellaneous boxes here. So first one we got here is mass. Now I have no idea what unit that is. There's no kilograms or ounces or anything else after it, despite the fact that I've got metric units turned on. I don't know what that is, but I like to keep things even, so I'm using a mass value of 1. Maybe a developer can tell me what that mass actually pertains to. But anyways, we're using a mass of 1. And then you've got structural and bending. So structural is the overall stiffness of the structure, to directly read out a tooltip. And then bending defines the, like, how large the wrinkles are. Now, to me, both of these values sound like the exact same thing. I don't know how something could also be stiff whilst not having large wrinkles. I don't know. They seem like the same thing, but evidently they're not. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and use a stiffness value of 30 so that we get some nice bends in there. And I'm going to use a bending value of 2. Okay, so you can experiment with this if you want a towel that sort of looks fluffier. You can sort of go to higher values so you get sort of like bigger folds. But these I found work fairly well. And as well as that, I want to increase the spring amount. So this is really important because we don't want to bake forever. We want to basically have it fall very quickly and find its sort of resting position very quickly. So the higher you set that to, the faster it'll find that position, essentially. You could almost call this value, instead of spring, you could call it speed, essentially. So I'm going to set it to 50, really high, and that'll come out a lot nicer. All right. So if we did this now, you should see that we get some sort of bigger wrinkles, and okay, we've got a nice sort of wrinkle sort of folding in there, which is all fine and dandy, but the towel is rolling backwards. It's swinging backwards, okay? So what we need to do, of course, is to put something back here for it to bash into. So we need a plane, a wall right here, okay? So I'm just gonna add in a second plane. Oh gosh, why am I jumping from forward, backwards? All right, side view, right? Rotate that by 90 degrees, okay? And with our towel here, let's move that across. Okay, so this is our wall. All right, I'm sort of getting lost in my own scene. Okay, here we go. Now, I'm gonna put the towel right at the top there, just in case it sort of falls like way too far down, all right? So now it's got a nice big wall to bash up against. And for this, just to make this easier to use, I'm gonna position this origin point on that edge right there. So let's just go Control Shift Alt C, the really complicated shortcut. Anyways, so now that that's there, I'm going to rotate this. Now, the reason I'm rotating this is that having it fall from a 90-degree angle all the way down gives it too much force. It bashes into the wall, and you can have problems where the cloth sort of goes through itself and other problems like that. So I'm sort of going to position it about there. So now the edges should sort of fold into itself, and it should come out with a nice sort of result. So the only other value you need to adjust here before you do the baking is the cloth cache. So right here is the number of frames that it is going to bake, sort of how many it's going to animate, right? Now 250 is really too many. You'll just be baking for a really long time. So I'm going to go with 100, and hopefully that'll be enough to get a nice sort of towel looking thing. So I've got 100 frames there, and I'm going to go ahead and click bake. And once that reaches 100 on my little counter cursor there, it'll be finished. So let's just wait. All right, so roughly 1 minute later, it's finished. And now when you hit Alt A, the problem. So we forgot to actually make our wall here have a collision. So yeah, that was a mistake of mine. Sorry about that. Sorry if you were actually baked and waited for that. So just turn on collision for the wall there and free the bake. Let's rebake it. All right, there we go. Let's try that again. Oh, good. Excellent. The wall is taking an effect, and look at that. It's now frozen in its place, and it looks like a towel hanging on a rack. Congratulations. You can now, I don't know, give yourself a high five. So it's worked. Now, if you want, what you can do is pull up the timeline, sort of scrub through here and find a frame that you like the best, basically. Just sort of pick. Generally, it's the one right at the end where it's settled the most. So that one right there looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and freeze it at this point. So the way to freeze it is you go over to the modifier and you just click apply like that. So now this is frozen in that position. So if you made a mistake, unfortunately, it's now set in stone. All right, so excellent. We now have our cloth set up. Now we can get on with the rest of it. So now we need to add materials, lighting, and the particle system. First things first, lighting, because we can't really do anything else without that. So yeah, the lighting is very simple for this one. It's just a spot lamp, and it's positioned sort of far about there, sort of roughly guessed about there. I guess that looks all right. Okay. Now this cloth, I'll just push this sort of down to the middle there. That's good. And then I'll add a camera as well. That's always good. All right. I feel like I'm making this up on the way. All right. Control Alt number pad 0. The camera's now at that position. Good. Good. All right. Now this is rectangular, so we can invert this X and Y, the aspect ratio of our camera. So let's go 1080 by 1920. Let's move that in a little closer. There we go. I feel like I'm reporting on a rescue mission. Move in a little closer. Pull that back to the side. All right. So all right, let's see how it looks when it's rendered. Let's go rendered view. Good, excellent. The lamp is really dull, so let's increase that. Let's go 4,000. There we go. All right, so now the lamp is a bit brighter, and the size of it, I want to give a nice softish looking shadow. So I'm going to go with 2 meters, which I'm using metric. So if I set that to none, what is that? Oh, that's just a size of 2. So there you go. So that's giving us a really nice, big, soft shadow, sort of making it look like it's in a studio, like a studio lighting setup, like really soft, nice looking lighting. Yeah, for it, basically different shadow sizes have different effects. Soft lighting sort of looks smoother and nicer to the eye, so it's used in like wedding photography and things like that. Anyways, all right, so the lighting setup, that's good. Now for the material of our towel. So select the towel, go to the node editor, and add a new material. Okay, so for this material, first thing we want to do is we want to give it sort of a cloth looking like sort of look, right? So the way to do that is by adding in a velvet shader like this, then combining it with our diffuse shader, combine both of them together. So by itself, this is what the velvet shader looks like. Looks really velvety. I think you pretty much have to always mix that with a diffuse or something. Anyways, and with that velvet, we don't want to have it sort of applied to the whole thing sort of randomly. We want to have it applied to just sort of like the edges of it, like a real sort of cloth would sort of look like. So this is a sort of cool trick to make something look like cloth. Use a Fresnel, that was input, Fresnel, and just plug this into the factor input of the mix value. Now, if I just give this a value of hot pink, you can actually see where it's being applied. Okay, so it's just applying very slightly to those edges there and the backing there, which we'll fix in a second. So let's go 1.9. That's good. Let's just add a subsurf modifier just so it's a little bit smoother. There we go. Let's go 2. Anyways, the higher you set that to, the more of that velvet effect is going to come through. But I'm just going to leave it at 2. That's good. And we'll just set that back to 1. Okay, cool. And as well as that, we also want to give it some translucency because fabric like this, like a towel, light passes through it. So the way to add a translucent effect is by using a translucent shader. So shader, translucent. Add that in, and the way you combine it with the rest of it is just using an add shader, not a mix shader. Combine the two like that, and now it's really super bright because this value here is far too high. So you would basically turn that down to something like that, and that would sort of adjust like how much light to sort of pass through it, basically. Anyways, now we want to give this a color of orange, but let's say you weren't sure what color you wanted before the end of your scene and you wanted the freedom to change things quickly. Now if you had to set this to like orange right there, you would have to set this also to like a lighter orange, and then this one here to a sort of lighter orange there. And then if you wanted to change that again later on, like, oh, actually I want a blue towel, well then you have to go through each of these like one by one and adjust it, you know, and it's really annoying. So instead of that, this is a cool way to do things. If you add in an RGB node like this, this is going to act as our master color, Okay, so we plug this into the diffuse like that. And then in the velvet we want to give it this color, but make it a little bit whiter, a little bit brighter, because it's this velvet sort of bright edge, right? So we're going to add in a mix RGB node, drop that in there, and then connect that to the velvet input and set this value here to white. So what this is doing now is it's taking this color, let's just make this a red for the point of this, and it's combining it, mixing it 50-50 with a white color. So it's now on the edges there, it's coming out a little white, and the more you set that to, the whiter it is going to appear. So yeah, that's kind of cool. And then for this translucent here, you want the opposite effect. You want it to actually darken, because the translucency, it needs to be darkened, essentially, not brightened. All right. So I know I didn't explain that very well, but yeah. So let's set this color at the bottom there to black. All right. And then the more you set this to here, sort of like the higher you set that to, the more you set that to 1, the less light is going to pass through it, because it's going to be combined more with the black value. So all the way that way, you're going to get 100% translucency, and more this way, you're going to get like 10% translucency, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. So now what we can do over here now is, if we want to adjust the color, we can just adjust one of these values, and we can get whatever sort of color we want, which is cool. So I'm going to go for a nice orange. So let's go hue there. Let's go, that's pretty good. Turn up the value, nice and bright. And that's pretty good. Nice sort of orangey sort of look. That's good, I like it. All right, now, the backing of this, you can see like the back of this cloth is showing. So in Blender, like it's showing the front faces, the majority of it, but the back of it is also in view. And the way that Blender treats normals is different depending on, I guess, how you've sort of set up the object, and I don't know what I'm talking about. We need to basically have a backing to it, right? So we need to add in a solidify modifier, which is now just going to give it a little bit of thickness. So now the backing and the forward and the back are now viewed as one and of the same. Oh man, I was started off so well. Now I'm just making up stuff. So it's got a thickness. That's what I'm trying to say. All right. So this thickness, let's give it a value of, I'm going to go 2 millimeters, which is being generous, I think, for a towel. Okay, that's good. And then after that, you want to add in a edge split modifier, so that the edges, like this is what it looked like before. You can see the edges have this dark sort of line around it. So you've got to make it a sharp edge there. So turn on edge split, set the edge angle to 80 degrees. So it's only applying it to just that edge there. Cool. All right, so the material is now done. Everything's ready to go. We can now get into the particle system. Yay, finally. All right. Sorry. Okay, so add a new particle system to our mesh here. And of course, we want to be creating hair, fur, whatever. So the type is going to be set to hair, okay? Now, the length of the hair, I'm going to set to 0.01. So that's generally about the right sort of length for, you know, this sort of size. If it was bigger or smaller, you'd want to adjust that. But you want something about that size. Now, if you notice, you'll see that on this mesh here, the fur is only applying to one part of it. And now that's a sort of a bug in Blender, where because we've got a whole bunch of modifiers here, it's only applying to part of the mesh. So in the particle system, you need to check use modifier stack. And now it's applying over everything. Anyway, I've been told that bug is going to be fixed soon. Anyways, all right. So the biggest sort of value amongst all of these, it's going to affect the look of it, is the number of particles that you put right here. Now, the best value I've found is to use something around 1 million. Now, you can go higher or lower than that, but 1 million works pretty well. But before you add that number, you might want to just, I don't know, let's go 100,000 just for now, because we don't want to do a few test renders first. And so that it's not too slow in the viewport, you can turn the display down to 10%. So it's not showing all of the particles, just 10%. All right, so with these particles, we don't want them coming out just straight. That's far too uniform and too flat. So instead, where are we going? Oh, need to turn on advanced, that's right. Underneath Brownian. So Brownian is going to give it a sort of a squiggly little value. So if I set that to 0.005, you can see it's also actually increasing the length of the particles as well. So you want to just be wary of that. Make sure you don't go too high. Let's go 0.003. I think that should be good. And then I can maybe set this down, something like that. And actually, I didn't do this before, but giving it a random velocity as well would help, because then it's not just coming out evenly, it's sort of coming out at, you know, different angles all over the towel as it would in real life. So that sort of makes sense as well. But generally, a lot of this is just sort of playing around with what you can see, and then doing test renders. So Brownian 0.003, random 0.001, normal 0.001. We're using really small amounts here. And now down here underneath the cycles hair settings, you've got root and you've got tip. So the root of the particle and the tip of the particle. Now in this instance, I found that having both of these values the same actually works out pretty good. So I'm going to set the root, whoops, to 0.4 and the tip to 0.4 as well. So it's now just going to be equal, yeah, from root to tip, that amount. This scaling, if you wanted to increase it without adjusting these, you could increase that. I'm just going to leave that as it is. And now that I've done that, we can go ahead and do our final render. I think it's about time, with 1 million particles. So we should get a nice looking render. Oh, and just to so it matches the final render, I'm going to give our wall here a sort of a nice aqua blue color like that, which is going to contrast nicely with the orange. So let's give this a render now and see how this looks. And there you go. We got our nice furry looking towel here, ready for a scene. Now, there is something that is missing, and it does sort of break the realism for this a little bit. And I didn't show it before, so I'll just throw it in right now. Creating the seams, so basically an edge of the towel where there's none of this fur, basically. It's a big telltale sign that this looks fake, is because of that. So to create that effect, you simply just select the edge like this. Both of those edges like that, and we're going to go with our vertex group here. I'm going to hit Control I, so it selects everything except that, and then I'm going to hit Assign. Okay, so now if we go into weight paint mode, what you should see is the whole towel is red except for the edges there, which means that if we go to the particle system settings underneath vertex groups, you can just check density group, and now those particles will disappear from the end there. So you've got a space where there's none. And also, just to, I guess, sort of break up the uniformity of the rest of the towel, you can do the exact same thing just by creating a line just about there. And I'm going to just go assign that weight to 0 on those vertices. And now, man, it takes a while to load. The weight paint should look like that. Now the particles are still sort of showing there, so let me just, I guess it needs refreshing. Let's just change that seed value, and it should, I guess, adjust. There we go. Okay, so now the particles are there. So let's give that one last render with those settings, and we'll see how it goes. And there you go. You can see it adds a lot to the realism. So this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like by adding in those seams and that little strip along the towel that a lot of towels have. So there you go, nice looking towel. Put 5 of them together and you get something that looks like this. So yeah, the cloth simulator is a lot of fun. You can do some interesting things with it. I used it for this tutorial. I used it for that silk cloth underneath the bowl there, so you can do some cool stuff with it. So I'm hoping you guys have some fun with it. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. In about 3 weeks, the architecture version 1.5 is going to be released. So leading up to its release, I'm going to be releasing a couple of architecture tutorials. So keep a lookout for that. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.